even on as I preach. So that's, and we'll go through all of that. But this is basically the north. 10 tribes go north. 2 tribes stay south. The 2 tribes to the south, by the way, are Judah and Benjamin. Yeah.
Which ones did you say intermarried with the Gentiles?
The
North or
10
south?
the 10 northern tribes.
Northern ones.
Yeah.
Okay. And it was the ones in the south, Judah, that thought that they were they betrayed them.
The southern, yeah.
The southern.
It'd
They
be
were the
Judah
ones-
and Benjamin. Yeah.
They felt like they were the true Jews.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot more to it than that, but we'll get through it as we go through the weeks.
Did they all go to Maranatha, all of you?
I think so.
Okay, Abram was late, so he's just wandering now. He might have to join you.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
sure,
All right, thank you.
no problem. So, anyway, that's really the 3 events that happen in the erosion period of time, and another thing. This is kind of a long lesson tonight. So, I mean, if we don't get through this, we don't get through this. But I wanted to just kind of give you some other information too. I'm going to give it to you more than one time through the rest of this class, and maybe as we get into spring, as we get into the second book. But it's a part of world history, actually. Everything that happens with the Jewish people and that area is in the history books. I mean, not everything, but they take anything out that's godly, of course. We know that. But let me give you just a list of some things, and then we'll talk about it. Let me do it this way. And you don't have to write anything down right yet. Yeah, I mean, you can write this down off to the side somewhere. I don't know why that eraser don't erase very well, does it? And this kind of stuff is just all the way through Scripture, and it ties in with world history, and I'm going to read a passage to you, and think about this passage as I'm reading it to you. If you want to note this comes from Revelation 17:9, and this is where John is given a vision of the future. And he says, this calls for a mind of wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 hills which the woman sets. There are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, the other is yet to come. But when he does come, he must remain for a little while. The beast who once was and now is not is the 8th king. He belongs to the 7, is going to his destruction. Make sense? Got all that? It seems confusing, doesn't it? Let me help you out here. So what he's saying is, this is John writing this, okay? This is the Apostle John writing this. And he said it calls for a mind of wisdom. And he's talking about these 7 heads, or 7 different kingdoms. And he says there's 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, and another has yet to come. So 5 have fallen. Where does John live? John lives during the time of the Romans, right? 5 have fallen, 1 is, 1 is yet to come. And then he says, and when he does come, he'll only be there for a little while. and now he is not, is an eighth king. The eighth king belongs to the seven and is going to his destruction. So the eighth king, this is what the scholars are saying, the eighth king is going to come out of Rome because he's one of the ones that have fallen. That makes sense? So what this is saying, all this is saying, is that throughout history, these are the people that have been in charge of the Jews. They were first conquered by Egypt and held as slaves. Remember that? And then Assyria come in, and Assyria, Moses brought them out of Egypt, and they went to their land. And then God came in because the northern kingdom was disobedient. So God let the Assyrians be raised to power, and the Assyrians come in, and then 721 BC, the Syrians conquered the 10 tribes to the north. Okay? Then the Babylonians battled against the Assyrians and beat them. Babylon was Nebuchadnezzar. God rose him to power, and then the south fell in 586 BC. And then the Persians came back in, and the Persians, they got huge. They conquered the Babylonians, and the Persians come in, and Cyrus, the king of the Persian, makes a decree that the Jews can go back to Israel, because the 10 tribes that went to the north, remember I told you 10 tribes? They are lost. They are gone forever. But 2 tribes remain. The 2 tribes, they were taken 2 different places in Babylon, and then some of them stayed in Jerusalem. Persians come in. Cyrus says, okay, 70 years later, and there's a reason for the 70 years that you can go back to Leviticus and see exactly why God made them stay for 70 years in captivity. But then the Persians said on May 14th, 445 BC, you can go back to Jerusalem. Then, a little bit later, Alexander the Great raises to power after his dad. His dad was a very great and powerful king. He comes to power, goes through Israel. He Hellenizes everything. That's what they call it. It means he made everything Greek, and that's why the New Testament is in Greek, which is the most fantastic language, because everything in Greek, every word, you know what the word means. Like in English, and have I told you this before about the word charge? What can you charge? You can get on your horse and yell charge, right? The basketball team, the cheerleaders can yell charge. You can charge your car, you can charge your phone. You can grab 2 hot wires and get a charge, right? You know, your wife can kiss you and you can get a charge, right? I mean, and how do you spell charge?
You charge on your
Like that.
All the same.
So if I use that, if I say I got a charge yesterday, you don't have a clue what I'm talking about, right? But in the Greek, every one of those words will be spelled different. That's why God chose Greek to write the New Testament. And it's an awful language. I hated it. I had it for 1 semester in college, and I petitioned to get out of it, and I won. I had to petition the academic board, but I did, and I won. But anyway, so the Greeks came to power. Then Rome came to power, and that's when John writes this. After that, the Germans have controlled the Jews for a long period of time, and now Rome's supposed to come back. We're kind of in this time of the Gentiles now. And there's some people who say, it wasn't Germany. But one thing we know about all these people, all of them initially wanted to kill the Jews. All of them. Or make them slaves. Or eliminate them. I mean, all of them did. So this is Satan working through the world kingdoms to get rid of the Jews. He still hasn't done it. I always said I want to write a book someday, and I'm going to write a book, and the title of the book is going to be The Gospel According to the Enemy, without ever quoting any scripture. Because all you got to do is look at world history, and you can say, wow, everybody in the world is against the Jews. Why would that be? That's a huge red flag. And anyway, that's kind of what's going on during this time. in Rome, we have the Caesars. You know, in Germany, actually, they're also said Caesars, Hitler. The Romans, in 70 A.D., that's when they destroyed Jerusalem after the time of Christ. And by the way, the Messiah cannot come after 70 A.D. Impossible. Because the Romans came through, the leader was Titus Vespasian. He destroyed 936 towns and he killed like 1.1 million Jews. And he destroyed all of the Jewish records. There's not a Jew alive today that can prove what tribe they're part of. Every record was destroyed. And if you look in the New Testament, Matthew has Joseph's lineage, Luke has Mary's lineage, because if you're going to be the Messiah, you have to prove you're from the tribe of Judah. Nobody could do it. So the Messiah could not come after 70 AD, and God made sure. But, you know, there's still people today that claim they're Jesus. But and then the Antichrist is going to be from Rome. So that's kind of a short little history lesson on what's going to happen. But anyway, does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I hope that makes sense, and we'll look at that again because that's just an important, and that attaches to world history. Yeah.
Quick question, and this is a little bit of a tangent, but where in the Bible does it say that the Antichrist is to come from Rome?
He's supposed to be Rome, a Roman descent. Yeah, I'd have to look that up. Mm-hmm.
That's great.
And it's one of those things that some people say, yeah, that's what it means, and other people say no.
Okay, so it's just
But
like-
a lot of people say yeah.
Yeah, because I've never heard of that before.
Okay. Yeah, I believe it's in Revelation. Okay. So we are at the erosion period, and it says there at the top of your page, Israel is divided. And so the story of what happens here is, and you can read about the story of Rehoboam in 1 Kings 12, 1 to 15. Talks about that, and that was part of your reading for tonight. But Solomon appoints his son Rehoboam as heir to the throne, to be in charge, and that's just a. Let me turn there real quick. So what happens in? Did everybody get that read? Romans or 1 Kings 12. When it came time for him to die, anyway, Solomon died right before chapter 12. Rehoboam comes in. He goes to Shechem. All Israel had gone there before them, and they come to him, and the whole assembly comes to him, and they say in verse 4, "Your father put a heavy yoke on us, but now lighten the harsh labor and the heavy yoke he put on us, and we will serve you." And Rehoboam says, "Go away for 3 days and come back to me." So the people went away. So, I mean, he seemed to have wisdom at first, because he said, go away. I mean, think about it, because God had already told the Israelites clear back in Leviticus that when you say you want a king, he's going to take the best of your young men, the best of your women, the best of your land, vineyards, all that. And you're going to pay a lot of taxes. And so the people had this heavy burden on them. And so Rehoboam comes in, and the people are just saying, we can't take it anymore. Lighten the burden, we'll gladly, And so he says, so what he does is he calls the elders in, the ones that served his father, Solomon. And he said, how would you advise me to answer these people? And they say in verse 7, if today you'll be a servant to these people and serve them and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your servant. I mean, already he's getting a kingdom where there's not really any silver, because silver is not enough value, right? Everything's made of gold, and money is everywhere. I mean, what do you need more for, I mean, he's got all this. He's inherited this kingdom. He can inherit, and then he calls the young men in and asks them what to do, And the young men in verse 10 replied to him, "Tell these people, you've said your father put a heavy yoke on us, but make our yoke lighter." And we're halfway down your page, on page 62, by the way. He says, tell them, my little finger is thicker than my father's waist. And a better translation would be thicker than my father's thigh, because your thigh is the most powerful muscle in your body. And so, you can push more with your leg than you can pull with your arm, because it's more massive. It's got more strength to it. And he's saying, tell them that my little finger is stronger than my dad's thigh, which is the absolute wrong thing to do. And so that's what he does. It says in verse 12, 3 days later, he calls the people back, and he answered the people harshly, it says in verse 13, rejecting the advice given him by the elders. So basically what happens at that point, after these 40 years of heavy taxation, Israel was looking, the answer on your page is relief. He was looking for some relief. And so Jeroboam is in kind of like political asylum in Egypt. He's been down there, and he's actually under the presence of a pharaoh called Shishak. Actually, Shishak is mentioned on the first Indiana Jones movie. They mentioned Shishak on that movie, but the Raiders of the Lost Ark, I guess. But he's hiding out from Solomon, and because he thought Solomon would kill him. So when Solomon dies, he comes back, and the blank in your thank you. Man, did you see them reflexes? Holy cow! So Jeroboam returns from Egypt. When he heard that Solomon was dead. And so basically, on your next page, on page 63, Israel makes this request to Rehoboam. Would somebody read those verses there? 1 Kings. Oh, that was not what I thought it was. Sorry. That's not what I want you to read. That's the request to Rehoboam. And I already give you the blanks. Rehoboam asked the older men and the younger men. My page isn't like that. Okay. So he asked the older man, he asked the younger man, he made his decision. And then down at the bottom was really where I was getting to next. 10 tribes go north and take the name Israel, which we had up here earlier. And then 2 tribes go south and take the name Judah. So Rehoboam just ruled over these two tribes to the south, was what he did. Any thoughts on that? There's a lot of space taken up here just for that little bit, but it's basically what I'd said before I wrote this stuff on the board, that the nation splits, and 10 tribes go to the north, and then 2 tribes stay in the south. So the story of the northern kingdom, let me give you the first couple blanks there, on page 64. Israel has 19 kings. Of all the kings, none of them are good. And there's a little evaluation over to the right-hand side of your page. You've got a list there of all the kings, and I'm glad that this has changed, because used to we had to fill out all this in. That took way too long. So it's all filled in for you, and it shows the number of years they ruled. And remember, at the top, it started in 931, because that's when the nation split. Was at this point where Solomon died, Rehoboam takes the south, and now we're talking about the north on this page. And the north is where Jeroboam is at. He's the first king. He reigns 22 years, but he's not a godly king. And that old saying, if you got a good king, the people get better. You got a bad king, things get worse. I mean, people are going to fall in line with what's happening. I mean, we've seen that in the United States. I mean, it's pretty clear. So that's what happens. And they had all of these bad kings. And then you get down to Ahab, which is the 7th king. He rules 22 years, and he is the worst. I mean, none of these guys are good, really. There's a couple of them that do a couple good things, but not a lot. And what we used to do in this class was go through several of the kings, talk about them particular kings. I don't know that that's necessary, so I'm kind of glad it's the way it is now. We're going to talk about a few of them, but not in the detail that we would have. We're going to just mention some of the major kings, but not like we used to. So anyway, that page there is kind of important because, I mean, this is a long period of time. You know, we're talking a couple hundred years went by. Yeah.
What happened with the 7-day king? Did he get murdered or die hard?
I don't know. I think that might be. I don't remember now.
7 days.
I read this the other day. I knew we talked about Jehu and Ahab. No. I don't know. We could look that up and see what happened to him. Not long. Yeah.
That's pretty short reign.
Yeah, there's some in the southern kingdom that reigned a very, very short time too. Let me find that here for you. This is mentioned in 1 Kings 16.
It says, so what do you have in the Bible? Let's go with that first. I looked it up on Google.
What he did was he murdered Asa. It says he murdered the king, and they so when the people heard it, they claimed Omri, which is the next king. They claimed they accepted him as king, and so he went into the citadel of the royal palace and set the palace on fire around him, and so he died.
So he committed
Killed him
suicide.
suicide,
So
basically.
I mean, he didn't even have a time to get his business cards printed. I mean, that guy he wasn't there for long. So it's just amazing at how God has done all he's done for these people, right? I mean, they went through this blessed time of King David and Solomon. I mean, they've had 80 years of this, okay, of incredible blessings. No war during the time of Solomon. They had 40 years of peace, and now all of a sudden, you know, they start turning away. So then, if you flip the page then to page 65, you see the story of the southern kingdom, and it's better, but not a lot better. Let me give you the blanks. Judah has 20 kings, and of all the kings, few of them are good. There is a few of them. And then the second blank is the southern kingdom becomes known for its cycles.
What's
And
the first one known for?
Which one is-
few of them are good.
No,
20
no,
kings.
She's talking about the northern king. They were known for
Okay.
wickedness.
Oh, did I miss that?
Yeah, I think it's wickedness,
The northern kingdom becomes known for idolatry.
idolatry.
Yeah, they go back to serving the Baals and Ashereth and all the gods of the Canaanites. So they go back to serving other gods. And then on your page there, it says the southern kingdom exists from 933 to 586 BC. So they lasted longer. The other kingdom was destroyed in 721, and that would have been during the time of Hezekiah. who was the 13th king of the southern kingdom, and he was the best, definitely the best. But interestingly enough, he had a son called Manasseh, and his son was the worst. So if one of your kid turns out rotten, this guy did, that's for sure. So, and we see that with other people in the Bible as well. But there's, some of them didn't reign very long at all. You got Jehoahaz reigned 3 months, Jehoiachin reigned 3 months, and some of them reigned at a pretty young age, and we'll talk about that in a minute.
Does kind of go back and forth though, doesn't it? Good and bad, and good
Yep.
and bad, and good and bad.
Yep. So it's over a long period of time. We're talking several hundred years here during this time. And then if you look on page 66, this is just a really good kind of a page that has dates on the left, and then the approximate dates of the northern kings, the southern kings, and also when the prophets lived during that time. And it's kind of interesting because when there's a lot of trouble, God sends a lot of prophets because he's trying to get the people to turn back. Stop what you're doing, repent, follow me. That's what God has done repeatedly. And then over on the right-hand side, then you got the name of some of the foreign kings that are well known. So then if you look on page 67, it kind of shows you the break between the 10 tribes and the 2 tribes of Judah. And the break is just a little, in this picture, it's just a little bit north of Jerusalem, where you kind of see it go up at an angle there as a V and come back down. That Jerusalem is about where the top of that V is, or like an upside down V, but
So that would keep Jerusalem in the bottom.
that'd keep Jerusalem and Judah. Yep.
Judah.
And honestly, you get outside of Jerusalem, outside of the main town, it's just wilderness. I'm talking rolling hills, sand, it's like sand dunes, rock. There's nothing there. There's suburbs and stuff like that in the proper city of Jerusalem. You get outside of Jerusalem, and you can look as far as you want. You don't see anything. Nothing. If you get up on a high spot, you can look way off to it'd be the northeast, and you can see Jericho. It's about 23 miles away, and you can see the top of it's pretty close to the top of the Dead Sea, and then the Jordan River comes from Galilee down to the Dead Sea. But in the wilderness out there, there's literally nothing. I've been all through that wilderness a couple different times, and it's there's nothing there. Actually, there is a spring in Jerusalem that carries water all the way to Jericho, and it still carries water after 2,000 years. And it's kind of interesting because any place there's a leak, there's greenery growing right there around where it leaks. But it's been leaking been taking water all this time. It's pipes they made out of pipes. And believe it or not, in the first century, they had pipes. They had pipes that one end of the pipe fit into the end of the other pipe, just like we have. And they had running water in pipes, metal pipes made out of lead. Some of the lead pipes are like that big around. They run on top of the ground. They had fountains, like you'd think, where water would come out and people would get drinks. And here a few years ago, they did a study, and I found this out when I was in Rome, or in Italy, and I went to, let me think of it in a minute. I sent a guy to get it. He'll be back. You ever heard of Mount Vesuvius? It blew up. The whole top blew up. Cubic mile blew up, and it came down. The hot ashes came down on Pompeii. That's it.
Yeah, that's the right guy.
Yeah. Thanks. I thought it was a guy. It was a girl. They have pipes on top of the ground in Pompeii, and they've studied them pipes, and they found out that they put some kind of tree sap inside the pipes, and it kept them from getting lead poisoning. It's like we didn't know that in the United States until 1978, when they outlawed lead and paint and that kind of thing. But it's like they did so many things back then, and these pipes 2,000 years later, they're carrying pipes. You know,
They're still carrying
it's
water.
ridiculous. I had to have my water line dug up last year from just a few years back. I mean, it's like, you know, it's amazing how that stuff lasts. But anyway, that's the layout of the of Israel. And if you look over on that page 67, if you look over to the left of that, see where it's a gray area, it comes up beside the Mediterranean Sea, straight to the left of where it says 10 tribes. That's the Gaza Strip. That was the land that God gave the tribe of Dan. But Dan disobeyed God and went clear up north. And they moved their tribe up north, and they were not blessed because of that. But the Gaza Strip was originally the land given to Dan. So. Okay, we're just going to talk about a few of these kings on page 68. The first king is Jeroboam. He's the first king, and what Jeroboam's known for is he gets Israel started in idol worship. And 1 Kings 13:33 there says, Jeroboam did not change his evil ways, but once more appointed priests for the high places. And when he's talking about high places, he's talking about, you know, how they would worship foreign gods. And of all sorts of people, anyone who wanted to become a priest could be consecrated for high places. This was the sin of the house of Jeroboam that led to the downfall and destruction from the face of the earth. So this is the beginning of the sin that eventually destroys these 10 tribes, because there were no good kings. They all stopped it. And so there were many places apparently on top of hills that they thought would get them closer to heaven. So that's why they worshipped in high places. And these were false gods. And this is what Jeroboam had done. He led 10 different tribes away. And there's a prophecy of his destruction in 1 Kings 14. And that prophecy begins with verse 10. And it says, because of this, I'm going to bring disaster on the house of Jeroboam. I'll cut off from Jeroboam every last male in Israel, slave or free. I'll burn up the house of Jeroboam as one burns dung until it's gone. Dogs will eat those belonging to Jeroboam who die in the city, and the birds of the air will feed on those who die in the country. The Lord has spoken. God was not happy with him. He was put in a position where he could have done great things for God and honored God, and he led people down a false path. Omri, the strong king, he brought the northern kingdom to international fame. So he actually was pretty powerful for a period of time, and he was the one that came after that Zimri, who just reigned 7 days. Omri came after him, and he made, the blank is, he made Samaria the capital city. And that's in 1 Kings 16:24, where it says he bought the hill of Samaria from Shemer for 2 talents of silver and built a city on a hill and called it Samaria. So, and the Samaritans are still there today. Like I think I told you before, you can look them up. They still worship God today, and they sacrifice too. And he was terribly sinful. 1 Kings 16:25, he did evil in the eyes of the Lord and sinned more than all those before him. Wow. Would you like to have that on your epitaph? You know? Yeah, not good. Ahab was the worst king. he introduced Baal worship to Israel. Baal worship. This is who the Canaanites were worshiping. Baal is a mother-son religion. Baal is the son. Semiramis is the mom, and Baal was supposedly got killed, and she got pregnated by a sunbeam, and he died. 40 days later, he was brought back to life. It's Satan making up a mother-son religion because he knows what God has to do to take care of sin. So he knows that from Genesis chapter 3 tells us, about that. But anyway, God hates this sin because of the sacrifice of children. There are lots of religions that sacrifice children. Moloch was one that they sacrifice children in. And people do it today. It absolutely amazes me today that women carry signs in protest of abortion saying, it's my body, I can do what I want. I mean, if you can't get that right, you can't get anything right. I mean, how can you possibly think that you have a right to kill a baby? I mean, that's really sad, but that's the state of our world today. Ahab's wife was something else. Dogs will eat those belonging to Ahab who die in the city, it says, and the birds will feed on those in the country. There's never been a man like Ahab who sold himself to do evil in the eyes of the Lord, urged on by Jezebel, his wife. So, and it was at this point that the Mount Carmel contest takes place where Elijah takes 450 prophets of Baal. By the way, that's in 1 Kings 18, if you want to know where that's from. She's also mentioned, I think, and let me look here. I think there's another. In 2 Kings 9:30 begins telling the story about Jezebel and how she's killed there at that time. So, but Dale, the blank is Mount Carmel contest, Elijah versus 450 prophets of Baal. And the place where that was actually up on a high hill. There's a really small, like a little monastery there today. It's not very big. You can walk up a couple flights of steps and you're on the outer deck, and right from that point you look down the hill, and at the very bottom of the hill, it's pretty far down. It might be almost the size of our mountain here, but there's some trees on it. But at the bottom there's a little bitty creek, and when he met with the 450 prophets of Baal up there, you remember he built an altar, and they poured water over it 3 times. There was a drought at that point. I don't know where those guys got water at, but they got water. And that valley that you look across as you look out through there, that's where Armageddon's at, is out across that valley. Ahab's death, his death is, and basically you can just write down, it's a story of a king who he disguised himself and but was killed according to the prophecy anyway. He tried to get out of death, but that didn't happen. He died anyway, and that's in, I believe it's 22. The 22:20. No, 21:20. Okay. Next page, Jehu, the flip-flop king. he had a good side and a bad side. This guy couldn't make up his mind whether he wanted to be good or bad. I mean, his good side, he says there. Would somebody read that passage on his good side?
When he arrived, he found the army officers sitting together. "I have a message for you, Commander," he said. "For which of us?" asked Jua. "For you, Commander," he replied. Jua got up and went out into the house. Then the prophet poured the oil on Jua's head and declared, "This is what the Lord, God of Israel, says. I anoint you as king over the Lord's people, Israel. 7. You are to destroy the house of Ahab, your master, and I will avenge the blood of my servants, the prophets, and the blood of all of the Lord's servants shed by Jezebel. The whole house of Ahab will perish. I will cut off from Ahab every last male in Israel, slave or free."
Okay, so Elisha anoints him king, and he does some good stuff for Israel at times, but he doesn't really turn to the true side. And that's what you could write under his bad side. Just write, he did not turn to God, and he continued to worship other idols. So he wasn't fully committed. Oh. And then Hosea, the last king, and basically what you can write down there was he did not pay tribute to Assyria. Assyria had come into power, and they would, as long as they were paying tribute, they would leave him alone. But he would not pay tribute to Syria, and at this point, God allowed the Israelites to go back into slavery because of their wickedness. And so this was and basically what they did, because their wickedness was so bad, God those tribes are lost literally today. They're gone. And maybe just to give you a little visual of what they do when they conquer. When Assyria comes in, the first thing they want to do, and they always do when a nation comes in and conquers, they come in and they take everybody captive that's in any kind of leadership position. Anybody royalty, anybody that's got authority, anything like that, they definitely take them out because it's like cutting the head off the snake, And then what they do is they take the dad, and you got the mom, right? Well, she got a skirt on, right?
Yes,
and then the little kids, however many little kids you got, and they'll take the dad and send the dad to a distant country, and they'll take the mom and take her to a distant country, take the kids somewhere else, and they break the family up. I mean, what's Satan try to do even today? Oh, I mean, the major thing Satan wants to do is destroy family. If he can destroy the family, he's won, And so he wants to destroy the church and the family. That's what he wants to do. And if he can destroy nations along the way, he's doing that. But that's what they did. They come in and they and we'll see that in the Southern Kingdom. They take the royalty captive, and then they take the families and split them up. They leave some people there, but they split them all up. And so what happens when they split them up? You take the father to another nation, he's a slave or whatever in another nation. Next thing you know, he gets married. He raises a family, but you're not a Jew. If you're a Jew, a true Jew, your mom and dad both have to be a Jew. Okay? So if you're a Jew, you can only be a Jew if your mom's a Jew. In the truest sense, and your father's a Jew. If your mom's a Jew and your dad's a Gentile, then you're a half Jew, but you don't have a tribe, because the tribal lineage comes through the father. So if your dad's a Jew and your mom's a Jew, you belong to a tribe, but you're not truly a Jew. You're a half Jew. That makes sense?
Not a Jew.
If your mom's a Jew and your dad's a Gentile, you're half Jew, but you don't have a tribe. If your dad's a Jew and your mom's a Gentile, you belong to a tribe, you're half Jew, but you're not really a Jew because your mom's not a Jew. So you got to have both mom and dad. So it just absolutely destroys the family. And those 10 tribes are still lost today. They're gone. They're gone. However, Revelation tells us God's going to bring 12,000 back from each tribe, right? So he's got his people wherever they are, not bowing a knee, still being faithful, and that'll happen because the Bible says it. So, but this is what happens in that day when they're taken captive. So the northern kingdom is dispersed, and all of this, that first sentence there, I just want to read that. They were all dispersed because the Israelites had sinned against the Lord their God who brought them out of Egypt. I mean, all that God has done for them. And then verse 10 says, they set up sacred stone and Asherah poles on every high hill and under every spreading tree. And then 2 Kings 17 says, the Israelites persisted in all the sins of Jeroboam and did not turn away from them. So even though they were warned, so the Israelites were taken from their homeland in exile to Assyria, and at the writing of that, they are still there at that point. So it's a big deal. Any thoughts? I know we're going through this fast. There's a lot here. So. The major kings of the southern kingdom, you looked at them back on that other page, and we'll try to jump through these next 2 pages real quick. Rehoboam, the foolish king, we already saw that he was foolish. He acted foolish. He did what the prophet said he would do, and so there were sins committed under Rehoboam's reign. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, it says there, and you keep seeing that phrase again and again. We saw it all the way through the Judges, remember? And you get to the end of the book of Judges, and it says everybody did what was right in their own eyes. Well, that's not going to work, is it? Because hardly anybody thinks the right way. So, only if you're, following God. And so, they did the same thing. They set up these Asherah poles. So Rehoboam, not a good king for the southern kingdom. Asa was called the good king, and he turns the people back to God. It's kind of interesting. Asa is, there's people, I got a friend of mine, and she named her daughter Asa after the character in the Bible. But Asa was a man, but some people use that for a woman's name as well. But Asa was a man of prayer, and he has a beautiful prayer in Scripture, and actually that prayer is in 2 Chronicles 14:11. You have it right there on your page. He called upon God and said, Lord, there's no one like you to help the powerless against the mighty. Help us, O Lord, for we rely on you. In your name we've come up against a vast army, O Lord, you are God. Do not let man prevail against you. And so he has this quote, quote, cleanup that he does, and but we finally read about Asa's sin, and you can read about that, and I'm going to turn it over real quick to 2 Chronicles. And that is in 2 Chronicles 14. He 16, 2 Chronicles 16, it says, I was trying to find the right verse here. I thought I had that marked.
15?
16, 15?
15. Second Chronicles 15.
Well, that's where his
Oh.
reforms are at. he got this disease in his feet. And, okay, there it is. That's just in 1611. It says the events of Asa's reign from beginning to end are written in the book of the Kings of Israel. It says, verse 12, the 39th year of his reign, Asa was afflicted with disease in his feet. Though his disease was severe, even in his illness, he did not seek help from the Lord, but only from the physicians. And so, he, at the end of his life, he's known as a man of prayer, but at the end of his life, he wouldn't seek the God for help, and so that was not a good thing. Even though he was a good king for the most part, it's interesting at the end of his life, he still doesn't follow God. Any thoughts? Jehoram, the evil king, the blank is, he brought about the beginning of Baal worship in Judah. Yeah, yikes. Exactly what the northern kingdom did, and now we got one in the southern kingdom. And 2 Chronicles 21, this is really an interesting passage of scripture where it talks about Jehoram, and it says there in verse 20 of chapter 21, Jehoram was 32 years old when he became king. He reigned in Jerusalem 8 years. He passed away to no one's regret. Right? To no one's regret. Unbelievable. Nobody cared. He's dead. Good riddance, right? Nobody cared. So that tells you what kind of man he was. He was an evil king. But in the same hand, that's kind of a good thing, because the people, hopefully the people wanted a king that followed God, and if this guy is evil, they don't want to be a part of that. And so if he's done, he's done. So Athaliah, the female king, what you can write down is she is Israel's only female king. She was very wicked. The second blank is she is the daughter of Jezebel and Ahab. And the third blank is her life was marked by violence. And another interesting, she had some of her own family put to death. Just a very wicked woman. In 2 Kings, sometimes you got to jump back between Kings and Chronicles. She was the one that when Jedediah brought out the king's son, this is Joash, and Joash had been hidden away because the princes had been murdered. And so anyway, they brought out the king, Joash, and they brought him out. It says in 2 Kings 11, 12, they brought him out, crowned him king. They anointed him, and the people shouted, clapped their hands, and shouted, "Long live the king!" When Athaliah heard the noise made by the guards and the people, she went to the temple, to the people at the temple of the Lord. She looked, and there was the king standing by the pillar, as the custom was. The officers, the trumpeters, were beside the king, and all the people of the land were rejoicing and blowing trumpets. And she tore her robes and called out, "Treason, treason!" And Jedediah the priest ordered the commander of the units of 100 who were in charge of the troops, bring her between the ranks. And so they did. They brought her out. They seized her, it says in verse 16. And they brought her to the palace grounds, and there they put her to death. And nobody cared about that either. She was gone. And it says, the end of chapter 11 says, the king took the place on the royal throne, and all the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was quiet because Athaliah had been slain with the sword in the palace. So they were happy that she had been slain. And then Joash, I mean, when he started reigning, he was only 7 years old. So that's pretty crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
7 years old. What's the first thing you do when you're 7 years old? Candy for everybody. Right? You know, it's like-
Party.
That's crazy.
No doubt he was led by people. So, page 71, Hezekiah, the best king. He definitely was a good king, and his first act was to cleanse the temple. First act. And there's a lot of stories surrounding his life. He had a powerful prayer life. He literally brought the people back to true worship, is what he did. And so, just a great man. The story of Hezekiah's tunnel, just a couple notes from that. Maybe I can show you a picture of that next week. Or in a couple weeks. We don't meet next week, by the way, remember?
No,
Because
it's
of
not.
Thanksgiving.
Oh, yeah.
Hezekiah he literally cut a tunnel through the ground. It's about 1,500 feet long. I told you a little bit about it before. From Gihon Spring inside the city's walls, and the men came pick to each other. That's a very interesting story of Hezekiah's tunnel. I told you about that, about finding the plaque that they built it's in Istanbul. But his illness is also important. That's in 2 Kings 20, a very powerful section of scripture where he prays and God answers his prayer. And he basically says in chapter 20 there, in verse 8, Hezekiah asked Isaiah, "What will be the sign that the Lord will heal me and that I will go up to the temple of my Lord and on the third day from now?" And Isaiah said, "This is the Lord's sign to you. Will do what he promised. Shall the shadow go forward 10 steps or shall it go back 10 steps?" And he says it's simple for the shadow to go forward. I mean, that's what happens when the sun goes across the sky. He says, let it go backwards 10 steps. And by the way, years ago, they had this thing where NASA said they figured there was this time thing. That was all false, by the way. But it says, the prophet Isaiah called upon the Lord and made the shadow go back 10 steps. And Hezekiah lived. And so that was good. God told him he had allow him to live more years. So God answered his prayer and did what he said. The answer was good and bad. During the last 15 years of his life, Manasseh was born. And Manasseh is the next king. And he becomes the most wicked king, like I mentioned a few minutes ago. And so it was a blessing and a curse. But Manasseh had to be born literally to continue on the line of Christ. So that needed to happen. Josiah is the next king. He's the good young king. He becomes king at the age of 8. And the second blank is just quite interesting. He rebuilds the temple of the book, and the book of the law is found. So they're rebuilding the temple and fixing it up because it's been neglected. And what do they find? They find the Bible, the Old Testament. They find not the whole Old Testament, but it's the book of Moses. It's the law. It's like unbelievable. They've neglected. I mean, can you imagine that today? If all of a sudden you go to church and somebody says, "Hey, we found the Bible." Nobody had one. It's like you just can't hardly fathom that. But that's exactly what happened, and a great revival hits the land then because of the Bible, or the Old Testament laws of Moses are found, and so it's it's a great time. And he's a good young king. Zedekiah, he is the last king of Israel. And you can read about him in 2 Kings 24. Actually, verse 18 through 2 Kings 25. Talks about Zedekiah, the last king. That's in, verse 18. And then when you get to chapter 25, it says Zedekiah rebelled against the king of Babylon, which is Nebuchadnezzar. Chapter 25, 2 Kings says, so the 9th year of Zedekiah's reign, on the 10th day of the 10th month, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, marched against Jerusalem and his whole army, and they camped outside the city and built siege works against it. The city was kept under siege until the 11th year of King Zedekiah. So it was for a couple years, 3 years almost. And by the 9th day of the 4th month, famine in the city had become so severe, no food for the people to eat. Then the city wall was broken through, and the whole army fled. So the Babylonians had surrounded the city, and it was taken at that point. And then it says in verse 9 of chapter 25, he set fire to the temple of the Lord and the royal palace and all the houses of Jerusalem. Every important building was burned down. The whole Babylonian army, under command of the imperial guard, broke down the walls around Jerusalem. Utterly destroyed it. So that was 586 BC when that happened. So, and there's a little more to the story than that we'll talk about. So, we got just a little bit of time left. Where's that second Chronicles? Any thoughts while I'm turning to this? Okay, in 2 Chronicles 36, the last chapter in 2 Chronicles 36, and you can also read about this in Jeremiah 25. And I want you to understand that they are taken captive for 70 years. It says in the bottom of your page there, why 70 years? And you have these references there in 36:21. Says the land enjoyed its Sabbath rest all the time of its desolation. It rested until the 70 years were completed in fulfillment of the word spoken by Jeremiah. And so you can look at Leviticus chapter 25. I want to read that just to help you understand all this. But in Leviticus 25, and God had said this way back in Leviticus 25. He talks about this. He said, when you enter the land, you must give the land itself observe a Sabbath. For 6 years sow your fields. For 6 years prune your vineyards. But in the 7th year, the land is to have a Sabbath rest. And they weren't doing that. So God was making up for that time. There's another place, and we'll get to this at another time later too, but I want you to see it. You've got that written down there, Daniel 9. Daniel 9 is a very powerful passage of Scripture. It says in Daniel 9, in the first year of Darius, son of Xerxes, a Mede by descent, who was made ruler over the Babylonians' kingdom, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood from the Scriptures. Okay? He says, I'm understanding from Scriptures according to the word of the Lord given to Jeremiah the prophet. Jeremiah the prophet was the last prophet. He was there when Jerusalem got destroyed. And Daniel's doing his devotions one day. He's reading Jeremiah, and he says he's reading that the desolation of Jerusalem would last 70 years. And he's thinking, it's 70 years. It's been 70 years. You know, it's God's going to let the people go back. You know, and and you can go to Nehemiah then and read about, you know, the king making the decree. King Cyrus makes the decree, and you're going to be surprised by some of that, because 100 years before, in the scriptures, 100 years prior to the time of Cyrus's birth, God said Cyrus is going to make a decree to send my people back. He even names him, and then Cyrus becomes king, and that's who sends God's people back. And so it's amazing how God has worked out every single detail, put everybody in place, and literally what God's doing here is He's destroying Jerusalem and Israel. I mean, He keeps a remnant. You know, He still loves the people. There's no question about that. But it's enough's enough. You know, you keep rejecting me, you keep disobeying me, and something bad's going to happen, and that's exactly what happened. So, all right, you got a couple weeks break, right? And next time we'll talk about servitude. And so read Ezra 1 to 10. That's a good read. And we'll talk a little more about the 70-year captivity when we get there, okay? Any thoughts? Well, I hope you enjoy your Thanksgiving time off next week.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Where you sent out, Asa, the good king, and his sin was not seeking the Lord's help when he was sick because he was afflicted with the disease of his feet. Do you think it was like gout or something like that? Does it give any, like, what kind of affliction he had?
Mhm.
Just that he had an
Disease.
affliction?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious.
It seems like it would have been more serious than that, but
Yeah.
gout can be bad too, I guess.
Or diabetes or whatever.
Huh?
Or what is it when it eats, like a diabetes when your feet?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Could be diabetes. I suppose it could be. I would have thought it would have mentioned leprosy if that's what it was, but maybe not.
Really?
But you would have thought the way he had lived his life that he would have sought God, but he did not.